Welcome back, fellas. Let's put this in the ether. You know what? I think, in my view, right, guys should not cry. All right, men should not cry. Period. There might be exceptions to some rules, like a death, family, right? But in that, and even though in that situation, right, you cry. I guess you just try to find a place that's private and you could cry there. But for crying in public, I think that's a big no-no for a man because your perception is everything, right? A guy, right? People are gonna look at him as a weak figure if he cry, right? It's gonna be awkward around other men, right? Um, and to be honest, I think that's one of the ugliest thing in the world, right? When you see a guy's cry, right? When a guy's cry, when you see any dude cry, it's gonna be awkward, right, to be there because most guys don't know how to react to you. Most guys are not gonna don't know how to comfort you. Most guys are not don't know what to say to you, and most guys just gonna stand there blinded quietly and just like a deer in the headlight, right? Most guys are not equipped to deal with another man's crying. So the best thing to do is not cry, right? And not only that, I bring this up that you look weak, right? You look emasculated, you look frail, you look beaten down, right? If you're gonna cry, cry in private, right? Cry by yourself, away from people. I'm not saying we're human as well, right? Some guys come to that breaking point where guys cry, right? But when it when it comes to crying in front of public, in front of other dudes, and especially in front of women, right? Women might seem to say it's okay to cry, but in their eyes, they're gonna look at you as weak, right? Especially if you cry in front of your wife, right? Or your wife or some female figure, right? They're gonna look to you as weak. If a man looks at you a certain way when you cry, what does it seem like when a woman look at you, right? So avoid crying in public as much as possible. Learn how to hold it in, right? Because sometimes you can't hold it in. I understand it's feelings because sometimes your emotions get the best of you, right? But at some point, learn how to bury it in. Like I did, I buried. I haven't cried for a long time. I have never cried in the worst situation that happened in my life. I never cried. In in people's funeral, I don't cry, right? All these stuff, I ever since I was little, I learned how to, because when I was growing up, right, I get bullied a lot as a kid, right? I get bullied a lot, and when I get bullied, I cried a lot when I was a kid, right? So it gets to that point when I was a kid, it gets to that point where people were shaming me, making fun of me, saying I'm a crybaby. It gets to that point where I don't want to deal with that kind of emotion anymore. I don't want people to put label on me, say I'm weak, I'm a baby, I'm a crybaby. So what do I do after my last time I cried? My last time I can remember I cried, right? I hold it in. I hold it in. I hold my emotion in. I hold my anything that anybody say. I don't let it bother me, right? I just I, I just learn how to hold it in and learn how to not let people words affect me and learn how to let situation affect me because I know at that time if I lose control, right, I understand the consequences of me breaking down and people and when you were a kid, people kids tease one another. Kids could be very cruel when they're young, right? They could be cruel to each other, right? I'm not saying this on my butt. Everybody knows this, right? And everybody have the experience that everybody get teased by the kids once in their lifetime, right? So at that point, I learned how to hold it in. I learned how to hold it in so much that's up to my adulthood. I'm incapable of crying for some reason. I'm incapable of getting a reaction from people. I'm incapable of letting people words affect me. I learn ways of let people words bounce off of me. Learn ways how not to let situation get the hold of me. Right. Ever since then, my last time I cried, I just never cried anymore. Right. It got to that point where for some reason when I tried to cry, I can't do it. I can't cry on a command. I can't do that. Right. And I take it as a net positive because when you cry, right, especially in a social environment, right, people gonna have opinion about you, right? Ever since I was little, people have opinion when they were a kid about you when you cried, and people are gonna have opinion as an adult when you cried as well, right? But when we're adult, we tend to be more what less judgmental as we were kids. When we were kids, we're very judgmental of each other, right? But as people grow up, they become less judgmental. But yet again, they already make their thoughts of you, right? Like women are judgmental of you, and when you cry, they're even more judgmental of you, but they tend to hold it in back, right? And then they don't tell you up front, but in their mind, right, you're weak persons, and that's what leads to a lot of women breaking up with their man because they seem weak, right? Because their man let go of their emotion in front of a woman. Usually, when a woman tell a guy I want him to be more emotional, open up. You don't do that, right? You don't open up to a woman about your emotion. The same way you don't cry in front of your woman. You don't cry in front of your wife. You don't cry in front of your girlfriend. You don't cry in front of your mom. You don't cry in front of your niece, your sister, or nothing. Because as a man, we have a role to live up to. We're supposed to have that structures. We're supposed to have that strong mentality that even the toughest time that we could face, we supposed to live up to this mentality of be strong in that moment. Because women, they're expected to cry because they're very emotional, right? They're expected to cry in situations like a funeral or a wedding or whatever it is, right? Men have this expectation of keeping their composure, right? So how would you react if you suddenly see your friends cry? I mean, for me, I see my friends cry. I'm not gonna lie about that. I mean, I do have friends that actually cry, and it become awkward, right? I tell them like, bro, stop crying, right? It's okay. It's awkward too because you don't know how to comfort when a man's crying. And like I said, it's one of the ugliest scenes you can ever see, right? When a man break down, it's like something you do not want to see. It's like I don't know how to handle that, right? When I see a man's cry, it become awkward. I begin to distance off because guys. It's just me. Some guys, they're good at comforting each other, right? I'm not good at comforting a guy. Especially when a guy's crying. I expect a guy to be on notice. I expect a guy to be strong. I expect the guy to be, handle his feelings. Because I'm not there to be his therapist. I'm not there to be picking him up. He's supposed to pick himself up. Not me. Right? This is why I tell guys, dude, whatever you can, do not cry. Right? Don't cry in the most toughest time. Don't cry in the most saddest time. Just don't cry at all. And if you do have to cry in privacy by yourself, right? Let it all out. And if you want to cry with somebody, only pick the person that you're really comfortable with, right? Don't cry in front of huge guys, right? Now you make the whole situation more awkward than what it really is, right? So I know some guys are gonna have a different opinion about crying, but this is my opinion about crying, right? Try to avoid it as much as possible. Because, I don't know, I'm incapable of crying, but I haven't cried for a long time. And I'm planning to let that streak to go on forever, because I'm not going to plan to cry anytime soon, right? I didn't cry during my dad's funeral, right? I didn't cry during that type of things. So if you're a man, I don't think men should cry at all, right? If you're a man, I mean, oh my God, I don't say it's acceptable to cry for a man to cry, but okay, here's what I say. I would say it's unacceptable for a man to cry, but if a man breaks down, I understand. I completely understand why a man's break down. But as a man, you have an expectation to meet up. You have an expectation to maintain your composure and control yourself. Control your emotion. This is why I make videos telling guys you have to keep your emotion under control. Because when you don't keep your emotion under control, you become sporadic. You become irrational. When you cry, you become very vulnerable. Right? Especially when you cry in front of your enemy, you become very vulnerable and people take advantage of you. Right? And then you're very emotional. This is why a lot of guys, when their girlfriend break up with them, they cried about it. And then it's hard for them to recuperate afterward. It's hard for them to get out of that dark spot right? It's hard for them to not be depressed, right? When you learn how to hold it in, it's easier for you to move out of that phase. It's easy for you to get over a heartbreak. It's easy for you to get over a sad moment. It's easy for you to, if your girl that you love broke your heart, right? It's just easier if you just don't let this emotion get to you. If you don't become a victim of crying all the time. But if you're a man who cry all the time, you're subjected to being depressed. You're subjected to be more depressed. Subjected to be more sporadic, more out of control, right? More all this negative stuff when you cry, because you become a victim of your own emotions, right? This is why I like to tell guys, you don't cry at all, because when you cry, that's an example of completely losing control of everything. As a man, you have to have control of everything, and that's including your emotions, right? You gotta hold your tears in, right? If I have kids, I'll tell my kids not to cry, especially boys. I'll tell my boys, do not cry at all. Pick yourself back up, right? Pick yourself by your bootstrap and do it over again. It's only this. It's not that serious. Don't cry about it, all right? Everything will be fine, all right? You have to ingrain it in your kid at a young age, that you do not cry, because when you cry, you're vulnerable to your emotion, and your emotion is one of your biggest enemy as a man. That's what it is. As a man, your emotion is one of your biggest enemy ever, because if you lose control of your emotion, girl could use your emotion against you and take advantage of you, right? This is why it's optimal for a guy not to be subjected to his emotion by crying all the time, right? You guys could disagree or not, or agree. I don't care. But as for me, that's what I think. I think a guy should not cry at all, right? If you're a man that cry, you're a beta male. If you're a guy that allows other men to cry or says it's okay for men to cry, you're a beta male. Because I don't see any masculine attribute in that action at all, right? You might as well be one of these blue pill simps out there, right? To say it's okay for men to cry. I don't think it's okay for men to cry. Right? What if you have a bunch of Marines out there and suddenly they're all crying? How are you supposed to win a war if all the men cry? If you tell your men it's okay to cry, how the hell you tell your platoon to win a war if your men all fall into their emotions? This is why in an army they break guys down, break them emotionally, so to see if they could withstand the toughest element out there. And one of the toughest elements are their emotions. When you're in the battlefield and fighting with your enemy and you're captured by your enemy, right? You're not supposed to be weak to your emotion, because your enemy could use your emotion against you to get informations, right? This is why armies or Marines want the toughest men, the men with mental strength, because a man with a weak mind is easy to coerce. That's what it is. A man with a weak mind is easy to coerce, easy to manipulate it, right? And that's what I see when the men cry. He's manipulated by the situations. It's a sad situation, but you have to maintain control, right? Yeah, somebody died, but you have to maintain control. It's a sad situation. Nobody want to see that. But as a man, you must maintain your control, or else you're self-defeating as a man. That's not what men do. Men are not supposed to cry like that, right? And that's what I'm sticking by. I think that guys are not supposed to cry, because it's very detrimental to a man, right? But I may be wrong. You might have your opinion, but let me know if you agree or disagree, right? Do you agree that men should cry, especially in front of their own comrades, especially their own buddies and stuff? I don't think so, right? If you're going to cry somewhere else solo, by yourself, but not in front of people, right? Because people are going to have judgment against you, right? People are going to have ideas. They might hold it back because we're not children. Children say it in your face. Children are very honest, right? That's why children are very brutal when you were young. They'll say the honest thing to your face. But adults not. Adults are willing to lie to each other. But I don't know. I digress. Let me know if you agree, right? If you like my channel and you want to support my channel, like, share, subscribe. And as always, thanks for listening. I know your time is very precious and I value your time. On that note, guys, peace and blessings.